with today's panel, which is our climate justice panel. But could I have, as usual, somebody to please read the land acknowledgement? Okay.
We would like to acknowledge that George Brown Polytechnic is located on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and other Indigenous peoples who have lived here over time. We are grateful to share this land as treaty people who learn, work, and live in the community with each other.
Thank you very much. All right. So we are very honored to have two fabulous guests with us today. So on the far end, we have Tara Sicharan, who is the Actions Coordinator for Toronto at Greenpeace Canada and is a dedicated water and climate justice activist. Tara brings coalition building skills from her volunteer work with diverse grassroots networks. She's currently a board member of the Council of Canadians, an organization she's volunteered with since 2008. So please welcome her. And next to Tara is Minh-Ly Durago, who is a Franco-Vietnamese climate justice organizer and communications coordinator who uses storytelling to support intersectional, community-led change. Her activism is grounded in her identity as a settler on Turtle Island and is shaped by her Vietnamese heritage and lived experience in the Global South. Currently, she works for the Youth Climate Corps campaign, a youth-led movement advocating for a fully funded public program to provide tens of thousands of young people with good green jobs. She also serves as the co-chair of the Toronto Climate Action Network, or TCAN, a network of over 70 climate organizations formed to foster collaboration and coordination among climate action groups in the Toronto area. So please welcome Minh-Ly. Lovely, and you have a microphone that you can share between you two. So I guess, so as usual, I'm going to be asking just some introductory questions, but please be ready for your questions as well, because this is, and you all took the course in your first year, which was climate justice, correct? Yes? All right, good times, right? Okay, good. So again, this is really, because you're all going into the field, or the majority of you are going into the field, very soon. And this is really about, how do you connect to climate justice? Who are these organizations? So with that, I'm going to start by asking, starting with you, Minh-Ly, tell us about your work and TCAN.
Yeah, sure. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. This is such a great class. I've never heard of it, and I'm so glad that this kind of class happening in George Brown. So more around TCAN, you said. Yeah.
Well, all of it.
All of our work? Okay.
Yeah, all of it.
So Youth Climate Corps is a political campaign that is advocating for a federal program, a public program that would be able to train thousands of young 35 and under for green jobs. And that could be conservation work, could be residence for climate jobs and for just transition. So that would be paid, and we're looking for a big, bold public program that would be funded by the federal government. Right now, we have one program that's funded for $40 million, which is would be able to pay 350 youth, which is a win, but also not significant enough for the transformation or climate transformation. And TCAN is also an organization. It's a member-led organization that's a bunch of climate groups who get together to kind of connect and work in Toronto to work on climate work all across Toronto. So I've been starting these two kind of roles in really recently, so I'm quite new to it, and I've been kind of navigating, learning, and seeing how we advocate for climate justice in Toronto and Ontario too. And yeah, it's been quite a new experience of trying to connect with as many people, as many different organizations, and getting to to the Toronto area with climate transition. As we see in the world, climate is not the first and forward thing that we talk about right now. So it has been difficult talking about climate, but I see it as more of a different direction around climate, of how do we talk about climate more like what people are struggling with, unemployment, affordability crisis. So for me, I think it has been a shift of that direction in the climate movement to talk about our crisis of like everyday communities, and I think that's the summary of like.
Yeah, and we'll get it more into that as we're moving on. Thank you. And Tara, basically the same question to you. So tell us about, I know you have many hats as well, but Greenpeace, Council of Canadians, and any role.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Trish, and congratulations, you all. You all are about to graduate. Like, yeah, well done, you all. Yeah, sure. So I'm the Actions Coordinator for Greenpeace Canada in Toronto. Greenpeace Canada is probably the largest environmental organization. We're entirely member-based in terms that people donate money to us, so we don't take any money at all from corporations or governments. We are not a charity, so we don't have charitable status, but that is a good thing because that means we could be very political in our work, because a lot of our work is political. And by political, I don't mean partisan. We are very much non-partisan. You can vote however you want to vote, obviously, but we do very political work, especially when it comes to climate issues, climate justice issues, biodiversity, food, nature, a lot of different programs like that. Yeah, we have office in Toronto, we have one in Montreal, we have one in Vancouver, active volunteers to some extent in each city as well. And it's been really rewarding because we do a lot of direct action to hold governments, especially, and corporations accountable. So one of them, for example, is like deep sea mining. I don't know how many people have heard of deep sea mining. It's like mining the ocean bed floor to get critical minerals, and it's very destructive technology. And it hasn't started yet, but we want to get ahead of it before it starts, because the best way to stop something is by not even starting it. And Council of Canadians, I'm on the board right now. I'm actually going to retire in June. Imagine that, my term is up. Yeah, they do a lot of democracy, healthcare, and water issues, which is, I think, how I actually connected with you back in the day, because Council of Canadians were one of many groups that were advocating for the United Nations to recognize the right to water. Believe it or not, there was no right to water in the UN because everybody was like, why would you have a right to water? That doesn't make sense. It's like the air. Why would you have a right to the air? But because of that, privatization was allowed to take hold, and we had to like push back against it and be like, no, human beings have a right to water, and the United Nations should have that. And that only came into like effect in 2010, so fairly recently. And yeah, there's so much to be talking about. Like, I think we're gonna have a really good discussion today about the intersectionality of it all. When people come up to me, they always look slightly apologetic, and they're like, you know, I don't recycle as much as I should, or I don't blah, blah, blah. And it's like, y'all, it's not your fault. Like, let's get that. If it's one takeaway that you get from me today, it's not your fault, right? You're not recycling or being as good at recycling is not what's causing the problem. It's big corporations, right? Individual, I'm not against individuals like doing good and living a greener lifestyle. I think that helps people to be a little bit more empowered in their day-to-day life. But it's actually the corporations that are doing it. What our effect is on the planet compared to their effect, like it's not even close. right? But we know who they are, and we know their names, and we can target them, and more of that too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, but you started this, so Amelia, I want you to pick up on that. So what are the really critical issues that you're seeing today from a climate justice?
From a climate justice perspective, well, as I said, like, for me, it's very much the affordability crisis. It's very much intertwined with climate. As you said, the corporate industries, fossil fuel industries, billionaires are the one that are polluting our planet the most, and are the one who are the ones helping the system kind of like trying to be very much like blame other people rather than themselves, who they are the main ones who are polluting our planet. They're the biggest ones of fossil fuels. For example, RBC, the biggest bank we have here in Canada, has been in 2023 the biggest funders of the world, like the biggest funders in the world, which is kind of like insane to have a Canadian bank to fund fossil fuels, and then next kind of greenwash its image of saying, oh, I'm still funding sustainability, I'm still funding renewable energy, but funding the biggest of it all, fossil fuels. So very much like seeing who's responsible for it. It's not individual responsibility of individuals. We're all struggling to kind of have our groceries or our rent, or even like having our education. Like I heard that the education is like getting less funded than funded. So really much connecting those dots is really important of who's funding it all. But at the Youth Climate Corps, which I really like was advocating for solutions is very much something that we haven't done in climate. I think we very much like I've done in my activism as a student at U of T, a lot of like divestment of fossil fuels, divestment of arms, or divestment of like systems that we don't want, where we don't talk about where do we invest in our money. So Youth Climate Corps is very much we should invest in public. We should invest in public institutions, in education, in care, and health, where we need it, where we like it's everyone deserves healthcare, everyone deserves education. So really much having a climate justice lens of where we invest in our like public institutions, and that it's important to invest in public institutions has been quite new in my organizing, and also connecting to different folks in communities who are in their communities, the expert in the communities of like if you are in communities and struggling with something, or like in your communities you're dealing with heat in your building and organizing around it, and like saying this is organizing around my communities, and kind of like talking that climate is also connected to that, to those communities. So yeah, I think I can kind of like, this is kind of like my takeaways.
And Tara, I guess that you started, but talk about, again, some of the critical issues, but also the types of activism that you get into, right, that Greenpeace has gotten into. And Greenpeace, what I found out from you the last time you were here, is, do you know where Greenpeace started? I'm going to ask them. I don't know if you can ask them. Do you know where Greenpeace started?
George Brown?
No. But good guess.
Yes.
Where did it start? Yeah.
British Columbia?
Yeah.
Vancouver, yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of the most recognized global climate justice organizations in the world, right? But it started here in Canada.
Yeah, it started in Vancouver in the 70s, so it's about 50-something years old now. And there are offices like across the globe, I think 23 different organizations across the globe. Which is nice, it's nice to be recognized. It also sometimes comes with notoriety, like that's why we're being sued in the US for over a climate pipeline. But like, yeah.
Talk about that.
I'll talk a bit about that. Who remembers Standing Rock and the Dakota Access Pipeline? And like there was a whole bunch of people protesting the pipeline going through indigenous land, the native land. And as you all know from that, it was organized by indigenous people living there, the Dakota tribe specifically, and then their allies, and then civil society, and then other organizations. So you're talking about like at its max 40 to 45,000 people were there at any given time. And Greenpeace USA definitely were there as well to support and to lend aid, but they were not the organizers, they were not the frontline people, they were not the ones at the very start. But that pipeline company, Dakota Access Pipeline, they lost billions of dollars in profits because they were never able to have that pipeline built and take it to the refinery. So they decided to sue Greenpeace USA. And it went back and forth a bit in court, but I think right now they decided it's going to be like close to $500 million US. It was going to be more, it's going to be like 900 something million, but now it's like at 500 something million. And the reason it went after Greenpeace is because it's something called a SLAPP lawsuit. It basically means that we're going to try to make you scared and shut you up so you aren't going to take these kind of risks again. For the record, Greenpeace USA is fighting it. It's going to appeal again, and they're like 100%. We would rather like go bankrupt than give that company a single cent. They're not going to go bankrupt, don't worry about that either. But at the same time, they were targeted because of the brand name recognition, right? And then now it has a cooling effect in the entire climate justice movement, because if a smaller group is like, hey, we might want to go up against a company, or we might want to go up against a government, are they going to turn around and sue us now? We don't have deep pockets. It could literally bankrupt us, right? And then people are afraid to take a risk, and people are afraid to stand up for what's right, because then they're always thinking on top of their head, what if they come after me, not just as a organization, but they actually name you as an individual. Like, hey, you were there. I'm going to personally put you in the lawsuit, right? So these are some of the problems that we have. But like, let's talk solutions. Solutions is the better part as well. So yeah, we stand in solidarity with a lot of our indigenous allies. They are the ones on the front lines. They are the ones who know this better, as Millie said, than anybody else, right? My role is never just to jump in or parachute into a place and be like, we're here to save you. I think that is like a really bad thing that used to happen back in the day. And like, thankfully, we're moving away from that mentality. So it's always like, what is the issue? What does the community need? Do they even want us there? What kind of support would they like? What resources do we have that we can offer them? And Greenpeace and a lot of different groups as well, it doesn't have to be branded. It doesn't have to be like, hey, we gave support to Grassy Narrows for a thing. You just do it, right? Like, I do understand that sometimes you may have to be like, hey, could you put our logo, or could you do a little shout out, just, so you can get the money or the funds or the resources of capacity. But a lot of times you stand in solidarity with, you take a step back and you let the people who have been fighting this literally with their bodies and their lives, like, take the lead. And that looks like a blockade, that could be taking over RBC and doing an action in front of the building right down there in Wellington, doing a big street mural and blocking traffic for half a day, so everybody's like really annoyed, but then they're also on their lunch break coming to see what you're doing. It could be going to a mining conference and targeting a company that's the metals company that wants to dig up the deep sea bed floor and take all those minerals out and, probably kill a lot of species that we don't even know exist yet. Is targeting them and trying to create instability for their shareholders, because shareholders aren't going to invest in a corporation if they don't think they're going to get money, right? So if you keep on putting doubts in there, think about what Big Tobacco did for many decades, right? Every day of misinformation or disinformation that you sow is another day that a company makes profit. So flip that script. Every day that you can confuse investor doubts is a day that an investor is not going to invest in that company, right? And that company is not going to make profit, right? So sometimes you have to use the tools and the tactics that have been used, but turn it. And a whole other thing as well, and we're seeing this in communities, is misinformation and disinformation. And you're seeing that a lot on social media as well. So it's like, well, I saw this thing on TikTok. Okay, great. Well, I saw 4 of them on TikTok. Awesome. Is it real? Is it not real? And there have been a number of things, especially coming out of the elections that were happening in the States as well, showing that it wasn't just people who had, heard a rumor and told their friend and told their friend. A lot of this was very targeted by Russian bots that were carefully going into the social media sphere and putting out stuff there to cause doubt and confusion and outright lies. And again, it doesn't mean that you aren't smart and you don't have the resources, but when there's so much conflicting evidence and data, you feel paralyzed and you don't know what to do. And then people are looking at you and being like, I want to do something, but everybody's telling me something different. What do I do, right? So thinking about credible sources, credible people, lots of really good reporters. I know journalism is a hard sell right now. They're so tight, they're so crunched. But really good reports and research and stuff. So you are informed and you know how to do it. And you could be like, aha, I've also heard that myth, and let me tell you why it's a myth, right? So there's education to be done, but you would think now that we have virtually the entire world on your computer, on your phone, that information would be easier. So at one point it was if only we had the information, everything would be perfect. And it's no, now we have all the information, and it's still confusing as hell, right? Even more confusing, yeah.
So I'm going to throw it out to all of you, because this is also, you are also climate justice workers as community workers. So questions for our guests? Yeah, hi.
Hey guys, thank you for being here. I just wanted to, question, not question, but draw the parallel between climate justice and also community justice. So when you guys were talking about the RBC being a major funder of fossil fuels, it made me think of also Barrick Gold, it's a Canadian mining company, and how they caused so much terrorism, to not call it anything else, in other parts of the world, and they've been extremely active in Latin America, especially in Colombia, also installing their own, they're mega corporations, so it's not just about extracting and harming the government, but harming entire communities, creating civil unrest, installing paramilitary groups. I know something that's very common in Latin America, also in Africa, I'm sure other places of the world as well. So I'm wondering if you guys have come across any of those things with conflict in that way as well. I know here you're talking about some of the indigenous movements, but is that something that you guys deal with regularly as well?
Yeah, 100%. When I started working with Greenpeace, it was 100% against banks for 4 years. So I ended up inadvertently being a spokesperson for Greenpeace, which was very, very uncomfortable at the first. But I'm a third generation RBC client. Royal Bank and a lot of Canadian banks were in the Caribbean long before they were in the west coast of so-called Canada. And that's just because of the colonial structure that we have started up with the Caribbean. I'm from Trinidad, my parents still live there, small island nation, one of the biggest in the Caribbean, but still small, right? And yeah, the reason why Canada has a extractivism type colonial infrastructure. We are all about cutting down the logs and shipping it, digging up the tar sands and sending it out, right? We don't really have like, there's some tech, yes, there's a little bit of manufacturing, but basically we are a country that has always run in that kind of colonial extractivism kind of industries. And the mining is a perfect example of that. If you look at the amount of mining companies in the world, a disproportionate number of them are headquartered in Canada. Why? Because we make it really incentive for them to be here. We have really good tax breaks. We do not hold them accountable to what they do elsewhere in the world. So when they go elsewhere in the world, they form a shell corporation. That corporation can go and do all kinds of human rights, documented human rights abuses, kill people, murder people, rape them, terrorize villages, massive amounts of stuff. And then they're like, oh, we want to hold you accountable. And I said, well, it's not us, it's our arm's length corporation. We're not tied in there. People have been coming here for the mining conferences every single year. Look into Mining Watch, look into Mining Injustice Solidarity Network, to ask people in Canada, hold these companies accountable. There have been laws that have been tried to pass to hold these companies accountable to what they're doing in the so-called global south, and without, every single one of them has failed. Why? Because it's not in the best interest of the government. Any given government, liberal or conservative, is never in their interest for them to pass that kind of law. So yeah, does that mean that we give up the fight? No. Does that mean that we have to stand in solidarity with those communities? 100%. And there are ways to do it, and there are very active groups in Toronto and in Canada large who are working on stuff like that.
Thank you, yeah. Great question. It kind of reminded me last year when we saw the Trump kidnapping the Venezuelan president. Yeah. And then one bank CEO was like, yeah, this is great for growth, for economic growth. It really tells what our system is kind of built around. It's for growth, for the money for the few, and benefits for the few people and local banks. So I think as communities, we mobilizing and organizing each other with each other is like, I think, good for us, and also with, I think with social media we also get misinformed a lot. So connecting with each other and then talking about these things with each other, educating ourselves is the best we can do right now. But right now we have leaders who are very much supporting those legal things that's happening around the world. So yeah, I think just educating, connecting with each other in our communities. In your diaspora and my communities, I feel like sometimes we get misinformed and a bit propagandized of like, oh no, this is great. In my Vietnamese, as a Vietnamese communities, we also sometimes say, oh, this is great, US is great, which is really, it makes me like, whoa, what? And yeah, just connecting with your communities, connecting with the people you know about these things and how you're being misinformed and being lied to, I think is the most important thing right now.
It's interesting also, Kai brought up Barrick Gold. I think it's also recognizing how their fortunes are sort of spent in our part of the world. So the founder of Barrick Gold, who passed away a while ago, is Peter Monk. And the Monk lectures at U of T are named after him, right? So how much of that is within our economy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you said like you will retire soon, but thank you for all of us who did it now. I have a question for me and about the climate change, climate justice, and thinking about young generation, like they said that this will come together. And what do you think, like from your experience, how or like do you think like young generation really need to work with that?
the younger generations how to communicate climate justice to them and empower them. Yeah, I think it is imperative on us to do that. Plug out to Green Speakers. If you go onto Greenpeace's website and you look up Greenpeace Canada Green Speakers, we do have a program of, they're mostly retired teachers that they talk about climate change through a different number of different modules, and they will come into school, I think grades 1 to 12, and they will talk about something that day, like plastics or recycling or something. They've got like 7 or 8 topics. And that is a program that really picked up during the pandemic because teachers were like, I don't have content, I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And they gave something like 8,000 presentations during that time. And now we finally have a person that was recently hired, like just 2 months ago, to help expand that program out throughout the wider GTA area, so like Hamilton and other regions as well. So that's one resource. And you have to fight back against it because, again, when I was working on the fossil banks, as we call them, not the big banks, the fossil banks, since they're all invested in fossil fuels, it was to my horror that like Royal Bank had put out a series of books for kids talking about how the climate and what you can do. And again, and distributing it for free in schools. And Carrie was the one who put me onto that, actually, and they're like, did you see this? I was like, is this a joke? It's like, no, it's not a joke. They're giving this out for free for people to give to their students in school. And they didn't, and this is why it's so hard and they're so sly and crafty. They gave really good information and really good stats. They did talk about climate change as a real thing. They didn't deny it. They did say like it is within our power to stop it. And then they went on to pass on how do we do solutions? Individual responsibility.
Wow.
Go ahead and recycle. Go ahead and count your carbon footprint. This is the thing where you can track how much your household generates carbon a day. Yes, we're investing in more renewables, solar, but they don't tell you how much, and they don't tell you by when. And then they put it on you, and it's not on you, okay? So when people come to me and they're like, I'm not an environmentalist, right? And I'm like, you don't have to be an environmentalist to care about climate justice. Because as Minli and Raish were talking about, like, if you're a human being, you should be caring about climate justice, right? Because it intersects everything. It intersects your cost of living, it intersects you getting a good green job, sustainable job, it intersects with your community having resilience, it intersects with like reproductive rights. Yeah, I know it sounds wild, but everything is connected, and you don't have to be a tree hugger, you don't have to be an environmentalist to care about human rights and climate justice.
It's nice to have a tree.
I mean, it is. It's not a reason to hug a tree. Yes.
Well, the thing is, you were talking about that, the individual thing, and one of the things, and I think this is BP Oil had put out the carbon footprint, where they were the ones who, one of the big oil companies, I think it was BP, they created the carbon footprint for basically that reason, to put the responsibility onto the individual rather than onto the big corporation.
Yeah, and they're not telling you what their carbon footprint is. The American military is not telling you what their carbon footprint is, and they have probably the biggest carbon footprint in the world, and it's not measured, and it's actually protected by law not to be measured, right? A lot of these companies, they're saying we're going to invest in green energy next year. We're going to invest in green energy in 5 years. Look, we put like 0.2% towards green energy. Like, they keep on moving the benchmark, but every year, without fail, all 5 Canadian banks, the big 5 ones, have continuously invested more and more money into fossil fuels, including the tar sands, including the pipeline, including the refineries, including coal, oil, gas, all the bad stuff that you want, that we should be getting off of. And it's been proven, like the World Economic Forum have said, for the first time last year and this year, green energy is actually cheaper to do than fossil fuels. So if you are a country, if you're a developing country, it is actually cheaper for you to invest in green energy, and then you're not reliant on this, whether or not the Strait of Hormuz is working or not or whatever, right? You have your solar, you have your geothermal, you have your wind. And we're seeing a number of developing countries going like, I'm just going to leapfrog. I'm not even going to go fossil fuels now. I'm just going to leapfrog so I have my energy independence, right? And this is good, but at the same time, the fossil fuel people, like, I make fun of them all day, but they are smart. There are smart people in the room. They've been making billions upon billions of dollars, like obscene amount of profits, and they know that this is happening. So again, they're like, what could we do to stall? What could we do to cause conflict? What could we do to cause misinformation and doubt? Because every single day that happens, that means another law is not passed against us. That means we don't have our hands held or tied. We get more profit.
Thank you. And Lily, did you want to?
Oh, I just want to answer to also how to be kind of bringing youth. I'm also part of another organization called Change Course, and they do a lot of, they organize around students on campus to kind of against banks, but especially RBC. And I think a good way to engage youth is very much engaging them in their kind of spaces, in campuses. At U of T, we managed to have, I was part of the Banks on Campus campaign, and we managed to have a little sit-in in front of the RBC branch. Each campuses have some kind of RBC kind of branch that's like connected to the steering union, which connected to like they kind of brainwash their way out of their image, or kind of we are for students, we are, and to have their image tarnished is a great way to kind of have like students have power on campus. This is our space, this is our we are paying to be here, we are be here to, and so we use that power that we have on campus to talk to say we don't want this RBC branch here because it is not in our values. We are for sustainability. We are for we are for a space that's like inclusive to us. So organizing on campus was very definitely gave power to students, and we had like I think 4 wins all across Canada. U of T, Ottawa, who also I don't know, but this is 4 different campuses all across Canada that managed to pick up RBC, which is a small kind of like thing that we did, but it helped, and we managed to talk to RBCs, like the branch CEO, and say we need to see your climate transition kind of like funding of fossil fuels. We need to see a plan, and it made us kind of have a voice, because usually they don't want to listen to us. They don't want to listen to us for sure. They want to see money, money, money. So having low organizing around students on campus was like really helpful, and how to, I guess, engaging youth in these spaces, because right now I feel youth are, we have the highest youth unemployment. We have our education system to be underfunded, so we don't see that much future for us as a youth myself. So seeing people where they're at and connecting and kind of building communities right now is definitely where youth are more keen to like build rather than kind of like organize around like something, but building community is important.
And this is essentially the work that all of you are doing, right? So community work, and how do you make those connections? Do we have any other questions for our panelists? Yeah.
Thank you for coming. One of the mechanisms or tools that used by climate justice activists creating political party, Green Party. So do you think this mechanism is working? I said one of the mechanisms that used by climate justice activists creating Green Party or political party. Do you think this mechanism is working by convincing people to elected Green Party members, and then Green Party doing the role to define the climate justice. Like Green Party start since 80s, more than 40 years, and is still in political issue. Still people I don't say they don't elect it, but the number of members in the parliament is still not that big.
Is one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just asking about the politicals and activists and the role of climate justice activists. So need more explanation about this.
Yeah.
So the Green Party, and so are we seeing activism is effective in political space?
Okay. All right, I'm going to answer you partially as a Greenpeace person, but also just as me as an individual. I'll make that clear. Democracy is a beautiful thing, right? I think people should engage with politics if that's where their calling is. I think having the Green Party is good. It's better than having a fascist party, right? Has the Green Party pushed and always pushed as a minority voice, but like tried to advocate for more? Yes, definitely. If you want to volunteer with the Green Party or run for the Green Party, go for it. Now, I'm putting aside my work hat and I'm just talking as me as a person. I am very disenfranchised with politics as a whole. Yes, I'm happy that we live in a democracy, but some people will say it's not really a democracy. We're kind of a Petra state in a way, because every single government who comes in caters to the fossil fuel industry, dams, and other things like that. And what's really disheartening for me is like we will fight really hard with really good politicians and really progressive social movements and like get an amazing bill in place, and then all it takes is one politician, cough cough Doc Ford, to come in and say, no, we're not going to do that. Let's just scrap the Environmental Protection Bill of Rights. Let's just take off the Freedom of Information stuff. Let's just introduce Bill 5 and forget about like free informed prior consent for First Nations communities and their Indigenous rights, right? And like you're seeing this move so quickly. You're seeing it in the States right now with like that person doing a lot of very bad things right now. You're seeing it happening in Canada. It's not just Ontario. It's happening federally as well with like a lot of these mega bills that Carney has introduced, right? Like some of them, they sound innocent. They sound like, protecting your privacy. And you're like, oh yeah, I want my privacy protected. There are a lot of hackers out there. But when you read the fine print, it's like, no, the Canadian spy agency can access your phone records if they think that you're a person of interest without a judge having to sign a warrant for it. Right now, a judge has to sign a warrant for that, right? They have to show cause about why you're a person of interest and what exactly they're going to look at your phone records for. If that law passes, they wouldn't have to do that. They could just go to TELUS, in my case I'm with TELUS, and they could be like, TELUS, she works for a organization with lots of people of interest. We want to see her records. And they don't even have to inform me that they did that, right? So look at some of the stuff that's happening right now. And like, I'm not saying it's as bad as the States. And like some people will actually be like, well, at least we're not as bad as the States. That doesn't mean that we're good either, right? So look at it really carefully, and a lot of what is being passed right now federally is mirroring what is happening in the States, especially when it comes to like ICE and information sharing. They want us to be lockstep with them, so that next thing your personal information could get shared with the US, right? And then once it's in the US, you have no recourse. Like right now in Canada, there is a way through, we have mechanisms that if you're arrested, for example, or if they find your records, for example, that they have to, there's a privacy commissioner, right? You can appeal, you can have that erased, that they no longer can keep that on you. If your information gets sent to the States, good luck ever trying to tell the US to erase your personal private data, especially if it was unfounded. They'll be like, no, we'll just put it in our database just in case, right? So there's stuff like that you need to look at really carefully. So to your point, sorry, I ramble a lot. To your point about the Green Party, are they good? Yes. Are they fighting the good fight? Yes. Could I ever personally do it? Hell no. But I'm glad that they exist. But I think we need to find ways that we ensure that our good laws and our good systems in place are so resilient and so strong that no matter who the political government is in charge at a given time, they will be scared and they will be like, you know what, we're not going to touch that. Because if we touch that, we know people will go after it. And we're seeing pushback now, like against OSAP, right? Like Doug Ford. Like people are like, oh, you think you could come? No, right? So you need to have it that no matter who's in charge, that the things that we have worked hard for are enshrined, and we could make more progress in the future. Because we have not come far enough that we need to be, right? The benchmark is still up there. We're still trying to reach there.
Yeah, I would also take off my hat as like someone who's worked at before. I see election organizing in political parties, kind of like organizing. I've been involved in the NDP campaign for Abby Lewis, and it was only one because we organized the movement communities around candidates. So I think it's mostly important to organize and build power within our communities to fight back, to be resilient, rather than it's an inside and outside. We can't just be always inside. We have to be also organizing outside and take pressure and kind of give pressure to the government, because we are the one voting for them. We are the one giving our taxes. We are the one giving a lot of like that. So we have the power, but we have to kind of organize and build mass movement power. That's my take. I think elections are good and parties are good, but we need to build also outside.
Thank you. Okay, there you go. All right. Do we have any questions from Omer and then Aiden?
Thank you very much. In my view, in Canada, the media is owned or influenced by the corporates or the big politicians. And they don't show the good work done by the environmental activists or the challenges that these new bills will bring with that. What is the best course of action against that challenge, where we can have a free media that will reflect the desire of people, who can speak for the people, environment?
I'll get it short. I think it should be media that's a public media owned, and that's because some of the media is, I guess, paid by corporation or paid by billionaires. So some have media, independent media that's kind of people powered, and people, we have like alternative media like The Breach, or alternative media like that, like more independent and more small, but they're also important. So for me,
Or Rabble.ca.
Rabble.ca, yes. Yes. So we have like really small independent media that are also super important and great. So follow that, and don't believe everything that those big media kind of like tells you, because they say they have a neutral point, but usually it's not very neutral. I've seen in the last few years, as like someone who's been involved in the Palestinian movement, it's been very, very disheartening of seeing the media vilify us, say that we are terrorists, so we are kind of like anti-Semitic or something like that. So having independent media and small media that you can count on and that you can kind of, I've seen like membership-led media or like small kind of things of media that are I think, the way to go.
What she said.
But also, it's interesting because, to your point, right, when more and more people are tuning in to to the alternative media, this is a real threat to the mainstream media because they're losing audiences. And so you find that the independent media is actually pressuring now the mainstream media to shift their stance. Do you find that that's happening?
A little bit. I think that a little bit it's happening, but it's happening way too slowly. Happening way too slowly, and I think because they have such a structure, and so like have such money, so much power, that it's difficult, I think. But yeah.
I mean, I also think it's slightly by demographic too. Like, my parents would not know what a podcast was if it hit them in the head, right? So, and like, they wouldn't know what TikTok is either. So they would just like leave CBC News on and watch that all day, right? Or BBC or something like that. But like, I know we work with Change Course, but also like Fridays for Future and other people, and it's like, you know, what are you doing? What's the last time you went on the mainstream media side? It's like, no, I just follow certain Grapple, Narwhale, you know, The Breach, other people, or certain influencers who are out there doing like investigative journalism, and they're digging it, and they can do that in that space. So it's a matter of like figuring out who can you trust, who can you not trust, it's not necessarily the ones with the most followers, because they're very divisive and people don't really like necessarily love them. But if they're fighting for the truth, and if it's an organization or a community group you believe in, find them on social media and see who they are being tagged by or who they are collabing with, right? And then you're going to get a bit more realistic information that way too. Yeah, and I think that's the way to go. And mainstream media has to play catch up. Like, mainstream media aren't talking to anybody of a younger demographic, right? So, yeah.
David.
Yes, so just kind of formulating a question here. Thank you so much for coming in today. I wanted to circle back to the idea that Mohammed brought up about political parties as a vessel for movements. And, you know, if it works, if it doesn't work, what circumstances it might work under. Tony Blair was the chair of the Socialist International when the Iraq War started. So it shows that sometimes when these sort of progressive parties get so close to power, they often become ensconced in the petrostate. Tom Mulcair is kind of another example with the New Democrats. But now with the rising power of the Greens in the United Kingdom, the rising public popularity, do you think that there's a prospect that they'll stay true to their vision, or will they just get sucked in?
Wow, I'm just asking the really hard questions now. This is where I would normally defer to my colleague who is in here. We have a really great person called Keith Stewart. He's our climate analyst, and he has been for years. And it's like, he predict the future when it comes to political parties, please, boom, and he'd be able to answer it. I am not that person. So I will give you my best educated guess, which is, I hope so, but I don't know. And like, you're 100% right. Nothing corrupts like power. Is not the same, right? Yeah, like nothing corrupts like power. So we have seen people who are very much on one side of the political spectrum and, you know, fighting the good fight when they're not in power, and then suddenly they become in power, and then their whole tune shifts and changes, right? And whether it's because of lobbying pressure or, you know, oh, we have a trade agreement, we can't break it because then we'll be on the hook for billions of dollars from the World Bank or blah, blah, blah. Like, sometimes, is it deliberate? Do I think that they're like, aliens have sucked out their brains and they have a new brain? No, I don't think it's that. But I think they are sometimes forced to bend to the system. And the system in place that we have right now is really, really deeply flawed. I don't have to tell you all this. You all know this more than I do. And it's not fighting. It's working for the billionaires. It's working for very few people. And the people who should be in power, us, the community, the taxpayers, we're not, right? And we're seeing this in the States, we're seeing this here. keep people poor, keep people hungry, keep people constantly fighting to earn a human living wage, that you're not going to be able to have the time and energy to fight for your rights. You aren't going to be able to take the morning off and go to a demonstration or a rally and hold your MP accountable. You're not going to be able to take time to meet up with your city councilor and be like, I want this and that and the other. And this is me talking as an individual again. I love the system sometimes in France, right? Because they are not afraid to be like, how dare you do that? Let's take to the streets mass mobilization of thousands of people. Politicians in France have a very short shelf life sometimes because they are scared of the electoral people. They are scared of the voters. And it's completely flipped in North America, right? Like the politicians here feel like they can do stuff with impunity because they know that even though people are disenfranchised, they aren't willing necessarily to speak up against it. It's not that there's not morally outraged. It's that, like, what if I go to that rally and my job sees me there? What if I happen to be the news film crew pans and I'm caught at a protest, and then next thing my employer is like, oh, you went to that? How dare you go to that even though it's on your own time? Right? They could be serious repercussions for you. One of my longest serving volunteers, he's been a volunteer with Greenpeace for like 12 plus years. He's a chartered accountant for a firm that is very conservative. And he's like, I will help you make banners all day, every day, no problem. But I'm not coming out with you on the streets because what if a client sees me or somebody sees me? I have another volunteer who, works for a big bank. She doesn't love it, but it's a job. And she's like, again, I'm never going to come with you at a bank protest because what if my employer sees it, right? So I think we need to change the power dynamic in a way that we are actually taking back our power. But what does that look like? I don't know.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned France, people in French. And I would say complain. French people like to complain. And we have a culture that we complain a lot and we don't trust our leaders and politicians. We never glorify or emphasize our leaders. You complain about them, be critical about them. In France, our political culture is very much, you work to have a social life. You work to have a free time. You don't live to work, which I love that. But I think it's sometimes in American culture, like North American culture, we do the other way around and I'm like, what is this? What is happening? So I think advocating for yourself at work is one of the best things you can do. You shouldn't be paid a minimum wage. You shouldn't be. You should have a union, you should be unionized, and have the free time to, as you say, talk to your MPs, to mobilize on the street, to have power on the streets and in your communities. That's like, I think, a good way to answer that.
Any other questions? Okay, so I have one. So, Simone, go ahead.
This is kind of just top of my mind, and it's a bit of a stupid question, but I find talking with about climate with people or people who are not in any sort of justice work, I find talking with people about climate, they're often like, I'll be dead in 50 years. I find it very hard to have a conversation with people about climate and get them to care. It's just like most things within community work or anything like that. But so it is. I guess probably the same thing. How do you get people to care? But that's kind of the big question. I find people are often talking about climate. It's either it's not in the country, they're doing it in, you're talking about the mining, it's somewhere else, or, it's not on my land, my land's not being destroyed, or, it's just not going to affect me, I'm going to have decent air for the next little bit, so kind of, just, as a whole, maybe, what could you do to even just get people to maybe have a little bit of empathy or thought?
That's actually an excellent question for a community.
It's a question that I feel like we all kind of ask ourselves about any aspect of our work, but so if you guys have any opinions on that.
Start. I think we could go go back and forth a bit on this one. Yeah, like why should I care? Why should I care? Well, you could do the 2 parts. I'm a bit dark. You could be like, actually, this is going to affect you because do you know how badly things are going in the world? And it's not going to be 50 years that we're going to be doing a mass extinction. Look at the methane rising, the amount of methane in the air. Look at people have been predicting this, right? Like, you see small incremental changes in the system. I'm not trying to scare anybody who's going to be triggered by this, I'm sorry. But like, it happens at a slow growing rate, and then it takes off exponentially. We're not there yet, but people have been, scientists, established, reputable scientists, have been sounding the alarm that like when the methane starts to come out, when all of the glaciers are melting, all the carbon captured, all the methane that's captured, it's going to go really quickly, right? Exponentially. So yeah, they're going to have to care because this is going to come sooner than anything. And then also for me, sometimes make it local. Like make it as local as possible and tie it in with something that they care about. So for example, like let's say the proposed airport expansion that Ford wants to push through. This is something he tried to do, like they tried to do, the government tried to do like 10 plus 15 years ago as well. And it was fought back. Communities got together and fought back and it wasn't approved. But they're trying again. And it's going to be kind of disastrous because the amount of jets that will be going over very heavily community areas, the air quality, for example, it could be as simple as like, will you be living under a flight path? Yes. Does your kid have asthma? Does your nephew have asthma? Yes. Well, guess what? Their asthma is going to get worse. So you have to make it personal because there's always something, like unless they're a multi-millionaire, billionaire living in a bubble, and then, yeah, like obviously nothing's probably going to like affect them. There is a way to always make it human and make it like directly associated with someone they know or someone they love about or someone they care about. That's the easiest, so you just have to find it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar as you said, but I can like have like a local structure because I've done like trainings around campaigning and organizing, and I think the most powerful way is to connect to your stories, your own stories. So you own story yourself, why you care about this, why you care about climate. You have a story that really like you care, and connect this person to your story. And they can be like, oh, it's an individual story that they can connect to. Because I feel like global problems, global kind of things, it's difficult to connect with those stories, but having your own story to tell is really powerful. And then connect with that and give your values and kind of like have a kind of arc of like story of you, story of us, and story of everyone else. I think is the best way to kind of like talk to people. And kind of tell that, so like why this you should care about this and how this could like help kind of like the justice or like how could this help the community or the kind of local communities that we're in is the best thing to do, I think.
Any other questions? So how many of you, because one of the conversations I was already having this morning in another class was that sometimes there's difficulty in making the climate connection to other things that people are working with in the community. I mean, all of you, I'm assuming, or the majority of you, have already, you've sort of got some idea of where you want to work when you leave this program. Am I correct in that? Have you made a connection of how that is related to climate? Are you able to make that connection? Yes? No? Is that a question that you would have for the panelists? So, for instance, how many of you are working in or thinking of working in housing or shelter supports? Addictions? Okay. What are some other areas that you would be working or you're interested in working in?
Food,
Okay, so food justice.
climate.
Well, climate, right? So there's employment. Okay, so any questions about that, about how you actually make that connection to climate? Because we are in a very serious situation, right? That we're sort of on the precipice. So we don't want to be all doom and gloom, but that is the reality. So, Merrick, go ahead.
I was trying to relate my experience or my course and my learning in during that course. What I have learned about environment, I was trying to incorporate in my portfolio or my resume, because there is a job at the Halton region for student. So that was the only time I thought about bringing climate into my resume, because there are very less placements available in this space. There are very less jobs available in this space. So no, people have hardly shift, like there is less funding in this area. That's why people are not inclined to go in this area. Mostly volunteering, which we are already doing. So perhaps that's the reason which has not compelled us to bring it in my resume or portfolio.
That's interesting. What would you have to say about that? So what are the, I mean, we talked about it's a largely voluntary, opportunities, but what are employment opportunities within anything related to climate justice?
That is a reality. There's not much climate jobs in this, and that's why I'm advocating for this public training kind of internship program that would see the federal government fund trainings and programs in the industry, because we don't have much of an industry and we don't have the funding. But the different jobs I can think of is emergency response.
Sorry?
Emergency response into like if there's a fire or flooding or kind of other things, or retrofitting buildings, building renewable energy. Community resilience and care is also part of climate, because when you are in a kind of like in the natural impact, you need community care and response over it. There's like infrastructure, community care, and different jobs. I think all jobs it kind of is part of climate, but it is not said to be part of climate. Like all jobs, not corporate jobs, but community jobs are part of climate, because building communities is a climate job, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard, I think Abby Lewis had come a couple of years ago to speak here. Yeah, and he had pointed out in one of our classes, community worker, and he had pointed out that community work is actually a dream job.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
I'll again, speaking as an individual, like, you need to make a living, right? Like, at the end of the day, you need money. So, is it good? Is it the best thing to do? But like, every corporation right now is trying to look green, is trying to look sustainable, is trying to say, oh look, we're doing like less waste or zero waste, or we cut back on emissions. There are jobs in there, right? You could become the environmental leader for a corporation or a public sector firm or a private sector firm. You could help do like their waste management. You could help do their, they probably have some sort of like social benefits, because they probably, again, is this greenwashing? Is this community washing? Yes, 100%. But they are creating those jobs because they want to maintain the appearance of being a good community actor, right? And somebody has to fill those jobs, somebody has to fill those roles. So if you could go in there and make it better than the other person who is probably going to be soulless and just do it for the sake of doing it, you probably will be like, hey, I actually want to invest in this thing. I'm actually going to push them a bit further. I'm actually like not working from the inside, but kind of working from the inside. And then, like I said, I have volunteers who work for banks. I have volunteers who work for very, conservative accounting firms and other places. It doesn't mean that they're aligned with the company that they fully support the company that they work with, but it's a paycheck. They're able to support their families with that, and then they can give their volunteer time to somebody else, right? Like, so I'm never going to be like, you know what, you have to have the greenest, most ethical job in the world, because unfortunately, they don't exist and they're shrinking. So make your living, try to be as ethical as you can, and you could probably, like, you know, I had a friend, it was a really funny story. I was at the big mining conference that happens, PDAC, and like, I hadn't seen an activist friend for almost a decade, and he walked by in a business suit. Now, to be fair, I was also in a business suit, but I was there undercover, putting out fake brochures against the mining company that wants to do deep sea mining, and I was strategically putting them on desk, including their own table, because they were late that day to show up. So they showed up that morning, they saw all our fake brochures, which looked really realistic until he went to the QR code and took it to Greenpeace. Anyways, that's my friend. I saw him and he was in a suit. And I looked at him and I'm like, no, I know that guy. I know that guy 100%. Like, we used to do rallies together, protests together, build banners together. And it's like, oh, is he here also undercover? Or did he actually like change careers and go work for the dark side? Both are equally viable, and we kind of like looked at each other, like, I see you and you see me, but neither of us gave each other acknowledgement because I didn't quite know why he was there and in what context, and he also didn't know why I was there and in what context. And then afterwards, like a day afterwards, I messaged him to be like, yo, you were at PDAC, weren't you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm there. I was with Greenpeace. He's like, yeah, I'm there. I work for like mining watch agency. They do auditing. So yeah, he was there legitimately. I wasn't there legitimately. But anyway, funny story.
But there is also that a lot of the, I mean, the majority of these people, are going into community organizations, right? And you know, so how can they, how can they advocate to have, or to bring the focus into community agencies? Because we see that, you know, community agencies, our sector, has been trying to make that connection with climate and, you know, food sovereignty, and climate and housing security, and climate. So your advice for them in terms of, okay, you're going to get this job in this agency, you're applying to these agencies, how can they bring that niche into them?
Bring the climate.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's, for me, like, because I'm doing a lot of like work on like bringing the government to fund climate jobs and community organizations and non-profit organizations and public institutions who fund, because we're usually underfunded. It's difficult to like ask like bring climate, but we don't have any fundings. So I think discussions around like how do we bring everything into like, this is all is intersectional, like everything is connected. Having a discussion of like how do we bring climate and discussion of climate and how our communities are impacted by it.
But with because we have, you know, TCAN here, we have Council of Canadians, we have Greenpeace. So would you give resources if they wanted to bring that in? So we're also looking at resources for community workers to improve the field as well.
Yeah, improve. I guess connecting climate groups, kind of like, oh, who are like expert into climates, and then we'll really organize and mobilize around with different climate organizations. TCAN is like a good organization that connects different climate groups together and mobilize together, so that we don't have to do like small kind of like campaigns allying with each other. So having different groups mobilize together to kind of advocate for climate is a good way to kind of bring climate into your organizations. I think that's like the biggest thing that
Yeah, I think you make it kind of like a win-win for them. You say something like, we should be greener, right? Like, we should be more climate resilient, right? You frame it in a way that like nobody's going to be like, no, that's a horrible idea. But really and truly what it comes down to most times is budget. And that's where you could get really creative with budget. You could be, for example, saying, hey, if we're gonna build community resilience, There's this really good group in TCAN, that's literally all that they do. They will come in for free, they will look at our ways of working and how we do it, they'll show us for free how to build more community resilience into it, and it's a win, and it doesn't cost you a dime, it just maybe costs you a little bit of your time and capacity, right? There's also stuff like, again, talking as Tara, the individual, there's grant money out there, y'all. I do not know how many friends who have really good community groups right now that were funded by TD Friends of the Environment. Did they feel bad about taking TD Friends of the Environment money? Yes, they did. Did it also mean it was the only way that they could launch their group and launch their art project or launch their thing? 100%. Did they, at some point, when they were able to be financially resilient enough to like say, hey, we no longer need your money, you can take it back, you can stop being our sponsor? For sure they did. But if this is the world, it is not a perfect world. I am not advocating, please do not say Greenpeace is telling you to go take money from TD, but like I'm just saying that there are ways and means out there that if you sometimes have to unfortunately work within the system to advance your goals, as long as you're aware of what you're doing it and you're doing it in a deliberate fashion, that you can get through, hey, 1 year of a grant, community grant from whoever, and then it proves itself, and then maybe the community group or workplace that